Apart from the last two sessions, I've tried to summarise some of the points that I think have come up today and that I think give us an indication of what we need to pick up on as we roll out our future online delivery and our blended delivery on campus. So here's a few thoughts based on today. Boulders are creative and innovative. I have been so inspired by having so many creative and innovative people in the room. Frank, when he started talking, kept saying words like pain and how much difficulty there was. But actually, you didn't really present it in quite the same way. But what really came through was your creativity and your innovation. And I think that's been so amazing. Also, very determined. A very determined bunch of people who just kept going and finding ways to solve things that you'd never encountered and didn't know you were going to have to encounter when you were designing something. Dedicated. I think that speaks for itself. I mean, you've seen these projects through to the end, and I'll come back to that in a minute. Collegiate. I think one of the other things that's very clear is that there is no sense of a traditional teaching team when it comes to these online developments. I think it's really great that the Burns team got the Teaching Excellence Award and that it did include all of the colleagues in media services as well. It was really enjoyable reading that particular application, and the collegiality within that was one of the things that was really striking about that particular submission. And I think that's really important. It's really clear that you have all been learners. You have all learned something about how you learn, how other people learn, and how you think about your own approach to learning and teaching, and the assumptions you make about students. And I think that's been really interesting to hear throughout the day. You're influencers of others, and I'm going to come back to that at the end, because you will have and already have influenced other people, but we need to do that more. So thank you. Before I say anything else, thank you, because a huge amount of time, energy, effort and commitment has gone into everything that we've seen today, and we really, really appreciate it and really value it, and clearly the students do too. So you should congratulate yourself on that. In terms of some of the themes that have come out, I think one of the ones that has come out through most of the talks is this sense of community, and what's been really interesting is to see that even when there are thousands of users, the experience can still be very personal to the student, no matter how far away they are or what size of community they're part of. And I think that's been really interesting to see, because it slightly feels counterintuitive, particularly given the demands on staff time to moderate some of these forums and so on. And I didn't think that would be as scalable as it seems to be. Really interesting, and I think this came out particularly in the art crime MOOC, was the different routes through study, from a MOOC straight to a PhD, or from a MOOC through to a PG Cert to a PhD, and that it is challenging the ways in which people actually come through their own kind of learning journey, if you like. Assessment does seem to be something that's still a bit tricky, so support for peer assessment, that seems to be going quite well. But there seems to be a bit of an issue of scalability when it comes to some of the types of assessment online. Some of the courses where there are formal assessments are still smaller courses, and we might need to think about how we can scale that up. And a few people mentioned the difficulties with group work, how that's organised and how that's undertaken online. So I think there's something still that we need to learn and try and develop a bit more there, if I'm understanding the presentations correctly. Really a strong sense that this has been a catalyst for all of you in your own experience of educational design and thinking about learning and teaching, and I'm curious as to how that's then affected how you design your face-to-face teaching, but that's another conversation for another day, I think pace was a term that came out a few times, that what you've done has allowed students to learn much more at their own pace, and how important that is. Where it came through in the student feedback was that students could engage much more in the learning because they could do it at a pace and an opportunity that made sense to them. And maybe that also helps them think a lot more about how they learn too. Lots of different words used for engagement: student enthusiasm, student satisfaction, interaction with materials or learning objects. The whole nature of, despite being online and not necessarily face-to-face with people, students still nonetheless had a lot of interaction with each other and with the learning objects and learning materials. And I think there was a couple of talks that showed really clearly how much their academic performance had also improved. And I think that's really the key in all of this. We're doing this to try and improve the interaction, improve the learning, and improve student performance. And in some cases, that's very happily correlated with an improved student satisfaction. Technology and tools is the other one. There were so many tools mentioned, most of which I hadn't heard of, and a few questions about how we support them and people's individual preferences. So something coming through about people having choices of tools that suit the way that they want to teach and they want to support communication. But maybe we need to think a little bit more about how that is for students. If they're going to have more and more experiences of online learning, will they be using different tools and different courses as they go through? And that might be fine if we're designing a whole programme from the outset, but if we're introducing more blended courses, there might be a bit more fragmentation for them. So something else we need to think about a bit more. What next? So I've picked up a few things during the day that I think I'm calling enablers at the moment. One is how we leverage the capabilities that you have all developed over the last 1, 2, 3 years, depending on how long you've been involved in the MOOCs and in the online courses. And how we share which are the best tools for the best types of learning or the best types of assessment. And I think this has been a fantastic day, but we need to do more of this and help everyone involved in these and everyone who starts to do these more to kind of shortcut some of the learning that you have painfully, to use Frank's word, gone through. Somebody specifically mentioned networking events, and I think, again, that's clear that you've all enjoyed this. A lot of people have stayed, and I think the networking is part of that. Staff development. A few people saying we would actually value more time to learn ourselves and to be supported in what we're trying to do. And a point came out very clearly about having local support for learning technology, and I think that's something we need to pick up on. One of the biggest messages, recognition of the effort and the time that it takes. I think that if we're going to do more and more of this across the university, and there's definitely enthusiasm for that, we have to have much more consistent understanding of what that really means, what you need to be freed up to do, and what the time commitment is for development as much as delivery, but development more so than delivery is I'm getting the message here. And that the IT support is absolutely crucial in the development and in the delivery of this. You don't want Moodle to crash in week 1, but as you say, if it's going to crash, week 1's the best week for it to crash in. Some developments, I have picked up on the aesthetics thing, not just because Anna's a colleague in the business school, but also because I think one of the points you were trying to make was that the principal rationale for everything we do has to be about learning, and the other considerations are secondary. And I think it's an obvious thing to say, but it's a thing we can lose sight of, actually. And so I just like to kind of really tease that out. And I think aesthetics do matter. How attractive an interface is, how easy it is, and how intuitive it is important. And another message that came out is that what's intuitive to us isn't always intuitive to the students, and I think Alexandrina brought that out really well. That there are some things that we will still approach differently than the students will do themselves, which links to another point I'd like to make. So in terms of direction, where are we going as a university? I think it's fair to say that there is a sustained and a growing interest on fully online provision as well as blended provision. But there's also a desire to really change the way we do our face-to-face teaching, whether that includes blended provision or not. And I don't want to lose sight of that, because that's absolutely essential. Students are coming on campus as well, having blended experiences, and need to have really dynamic and interactive face-to-face teaching as well as that. And I think we have a fantastic opportunity to link the learning across all of these different developments. So much of what you've all talked about today is actually, as I said before, educational design, and how do we get that educational design thinking into our face-to-face delivery and encourage other people to change practices and to develop what we're doing a little bit more. Just quickly, I think most of you will be familiar with these sorts of modes of interaction, but this is the kind of interaction that we're trying to encourage more and more on campus, and you'll see more and more rooms being equipped in this way to encourage flipped learning, blended learning, and interactive group work for students that's supported by technology. And a couple of the rooms, this is in the St Andrews building that we have, are trying to do that. And we would really welcome your feedback as people who have innovated in these kind of learning developments to tell us what you think of these sorts of spaces for face-to-face delivery. And for anyone that hasn't seen the video of the Learning and Teaching Hub, these are the kinds of shared spaces that we're trying to create, where students can work together, supported by almost invisible technology, better Wi-Fi, ways in which they can interact virtually. These teal spaces may not look like this by the time we open up new buildings in 2 or 3 years, because technology is changing so fast, and many of the things you've introduced in your own programmes might change as well. And then we have interactive learning spaces like the new lecture theatre that we're planning. So there's a lot that we can take from all that you've developed and think about how that works in a face-to-face context, but also how we can encourage people to think more about how they design their face-to-face teaching. So boulders, thank you very much again for everything, but keep going because our colleagues and our students still need you. And it is quite frightening to design entirely new teaching experiences for students. And I think, you know, you've learned such a lot. You are the best advocates for how to do this amongst your peer group. So, you know, I encourage you to keep your enthusiasm and to work with those who are wanting to support this and to roll this out more fully across the university. As we evolve the teaching model, I'm going to pick up on something that Vicky is writing about, which is moving not just from translation of practices from a face-to-face to an online mode, but the real transformation that some of you have spoken about and that we need to make sure really does characterise everything that we do from here on in. Don't want to lose sight of this because this is absolutely crucial. It's crucial to the future development of the online provision you're involved in, but also online assessment in our face-to-face courses is something that we really need to try and develop more, and I think there's still more we can do for the blended courses and the online courses in that regard. And really, as I said, encouraging others in your discipline. The people who think the way that you think and teach the same sorts of subjects are going to be more convinced by you than by somebody from potentially from another discipline. But also we have to not underestimate what that actually means. And I think your story about Burns, thinking about how do you go from the book to such a different way of presenting learning in your subject area was a fantastic example of a transformation of thinking and teaching and learning in a particular discipline. And the more people see that, I think the easier it's going to be for them to begin to visualise what they could do in their own courses. And last but not least, involving students. It was a great presentation to hear you talk about your own experience and what it was like to go through that Haskell MOOC. And this came out in every single one of the presentations, that students, whether they were interns or whether it was through feedback from teaching, were really fundamental in shaping how you thought about what it was that you were doing. And the earlier we can involve students in thinking about learning and teaching, the better. So that's really where I wanted to end. That's my attempt to summarise what I think came out of today. And you know, there are several of us in the room who have various roles and responsibilities to try and really encourage you and support you to keep going. I think we've got a few lessons we can take back for what happens next. But I just want to say thank you very much for everything that you've done, and I think you should give yourselves a round of applause for all the hard work that you've done. Go ahead. And as I'm the last speaker, I'm going to embarrass Vicky one more time, because I know there's a huge team that goes into organising anything like this, but I think we all know there is a particular person sitting in the front row who really did get a lot together for today and has been really instrumental. And so Vicky, huge congratulations on everything that you've brought together today, and thank you.